Listen carefully. This is not background noise. This is not motivation. This is not comfort. And this is not meant for everyone. This message found you not because you searched for it, not because of coincidence, not because an algorithm got lucky. It found you because something already shifted. You felt it before you understood it. A quiet pressure, a subtle pull, a moment where the world went silent for half a second. Most people ignore that feeling. They distract themselves. They scroll faster. They laugh it off. They call it imagination. And then they move on. Most people will scroll past this too. Not because it's wrong, but because it's accurate. Accuracy makes people uncomfortable. Truth makes people defensive. Recognition makes people uneasy. They'll feel exposed. They'll feel seen. They'll feel like something just looked straight through them. And they'll leave, not because they don't understand, but because they understand too well. If you leave too, nothing breaks. No alarms go off. No punishment shows up. No warning signs appear. Life simply continues, predictable, manageable, controlled. You wake up. You do what's expected. You tell yourself later. You tell yourself soon. You tell yourself when things are right. And years pass quietly. Safe feels comfortable. Comfort feels responsible. Responsibility feels mature. But small hides inside all of it. Small dreams, small risks, small honesty with yourself. That's the trade most people accept. But if you stay, something changes. Not loudly, not dramatically, not all at once. It starts internally. You begin to feel time differently. Moments feel heavier. Choices feel sharper. Distractions feel thinner. You step into a timeline most people never touch. A timeline where you stop asking for permission. A timeline where you stop waiting to feel ready. A timeline where you finally admit what you've known for a long time, that you were never meant to blend in quietly. This isn't about being special. It's about being honest. Honest about the pull you've always felt. Honest about the discomfort that never fully left. Honest about the fact that ordinary never satisfied you, even when you tried to make it enough. You tried to shrink the feeling. You tried to rationalize it. You tried to drown it out with routines, relationships, responsibilities. But it stayed because it wasn't noise. It was a signal. And signals don't disappear just because you ignore them. They wait. This message didn't interrupt your day by accident. It arrived when your defenses were lower, when your attention was open, when something inside you was already listening. That timing matters. Most people never notice timing. They notice outcomes. They notice results. They notice success after it's obvious. They don't notice moments like this, moments where nothing has happened yet, but everything is possible. This is one of those moments. Not because the universe owes you anything, not because you're guaranteed an outcome, but because awareness just sharpened. And awareness changes behavior. Behavior changes direction. Direction changes everything. You are not random. Say that again slowly. Not as affirmation, as observation. You are not random. Your thoughts aren't random. Your restlessness isn't random. Your feeling of being slightly out of place isn't random. Few people reached here. That's not flattery. That's selection. Selection by attention. Selection by resonance. Selection by willingness to stay when things get uncomfortable. Most people need constant reassurance. Most people need entertainment. Most people need to be told what to think next. You stayed without knowing what comes next. That matters, Because the next phase of anything meaningful doesn't announce itself clearly. It tests quietly. It asks one simple question before it opens further. Are you paying attention? Right now, you are. And that already says more than you think. It says you're ready to stop pretending you didn't feel the pull. It says you're tired of half-truths with yourself. It says you're closer to a decision than you admit. Not a dramatic decision, a private one. A shift in how seriously you take yourself. A shift in how long you wait. A shift in how often you ignore your own instincts. Nothing outside needs to change yet, but something inside already has. And once that happens, going back to sleep becomes impossible. That's why this message feels different. That's why it feels personal. That's why it feels like it's talking directly to you. Because it is. You didn't arrive here by accident. You didn't stay by accident. And what happens next won't be accidental either. The only question left is simple. Do you keep scrolling through life? Or do you finally acknowledge that this moment was asking something of you? Most people believe success arrives loudly, with announcements, with approval, with a clear signal that says, now it's your turn. They expect permission. They expect validation. They expect someone to point and say, you're ready. That belief feels safe. That belief feels logical. That belief is wrong. Real shifts don't announce themselves. They don't wait for applause. They don't gather an audience. They arrive quietly, silently, almost invisibly. That's why most people miss them. They're trained to notice noise. They're conditioned to respond to pressure. They're addicted to reassurance. So when the real opportunity shows up without drama, they dismiss it. They say, I'll wait until I'm more confident. They say, I need more clarity. They say, I'll know when it's time. But clarity doesn't arrive first. Confidence doesn't arrive first. Certainty doesn't arrive first. Movement does. That's the part no one teaches. People assume movement follows belief. In reality, belief follows movement. You don't feel ready and then act. You act, and readiness forms behind you. But here's the twist. The mind lies to protect comfort. It disguises fear as logic. It disguises hesitation as responsibility. It tells you to wait for proof. Knowing proof only appears after you move. That's how people get stuck without realizing it. They're not failing. They're not lazy. They're not incapable. They're waiting for a condition that never comes. And life doesn't interrupt to correct them. Life allows repetition. The same thoughts, the same doubts, the same internal arguments. Years pass while nothing looks wrong on the surface. That's the danger, because when things don't collapse, people assume they're choosing correctly. But comfort is not confirmation. Silence is not approval. Familiarity is not alignment. The real shift happens when nothing outside changes, but something inside refuses to stay still. A quiet restlessness, a subtle impatience, a sense that waiting longer won't make things clearer. That's not anxiety. That's timing. And timing doesn't wait to be understood. Right now, movement is possible in a way it wasn't before. Not because circumstances are perfect. Not because risk disappeared. Not because answers arrived, but because resistance weakened. Old excuses don't feel as convincing. Old fears don't hold the same weight. Old stories sound thinner when you repeat them. That's the window. It's small, it's subtle, and it closes without warning. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. Most people miss this moment because it feels ordinary. They expect lightning. They expect urgency. They expect pressure. But real change doesn't rush you. It invites you quietly. And if you ignore this moment, nothing bad happens. That's what makes it dangerous. Life doesn't punish you. It doesn't warn you. It doesn't remind you what you felt. It simply repeats. The same doubts resurface in different situations. The same delays disguise themselves as patience. The same hesitation dresses up as being realistic. You tell yourself you're being careful. You tell yourself you're being smart. You tell yourself you are being responsible. And maybe you are. But responsibility without honesty becomes self-betrayal. The almost version of you keeps showing up. Almost confident. Almost ready. Almost decisive. Close enough to feel hope. Far enough to avoid risk. That version feels familiar. That version feels safe. But it costs you slowly. It costs you energy. It costs you excitement. It costs you belief in yourself, because deep down you know. You know when you're delaying out of wisdom and when you're delaying out of fear. The body knows before the mind admits it. That's why this moment feels charged. Not emotional, not dramatic. Charged, like something is waiting for a response. This is where most people get it wrong. They think waiting longer will make the decision easier. It doesn't. Waiting only trains hesitation. Action builds momentum. Momentum builds clarity. Clarity builds confidence. Never the other way around. But here's what makes this different. You don't need to leap. You don't need to announce anything. You don't need to explain yourself. You only need to stop lying to yourself about timing, because timing is already speaking. And it doesn't repeat the same way twice. Ignore this moment, and the opportunity doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. It becomes heavier. It becomes riskier. It becomes harder to access. What felt light now feels complicated later. What felt possible now feels unrealistic later. That's how people wake up years from now, wondering why they lost the spark they once had. They didn't lose it. They postponed it over and over, quietly, logically, until the window closed without drama. This moment isn't asking you to decide everything. It's asking you to recognize something, that you don't need more proof. You don't need more permission. You don't need more time. You need honesty. Honesty about what you've been avoiding. Honesty about what keeps resurfacing. Honesty about what won't let you stay comfortable anymore. Because the real shift never announces itself. It waits to see who notices. And the ones who do are the ones whose lives start moving before anyone else understands why. Something unlocked at midnight. Not in the sky. Not online. Not in the news. Inside patterns. Patterns you didn't consciously track. Patterns you've been living inside for years. Patterns that quietly decided how far you went, how much you waited, how often you hesitated. At midnight, the grip loosened. Not fully, not dramatically, just enough to change what's possible. Old resistance weakened. Old cycles loosened. Old limits stopped gripping as tight. You didn't hear a sound. You didn't see a sign, but you felt something. Restlessness without anxiety. Pressure without fear. Calm without explanation. That wasn't random discomfort. That was alignment adjusting. Most people don't notice alignment shifts because they expect fireworks. They expect confirmation. They expect a reason they can explain. But alignment never explains itself first. It reveals itself through sensation, through the body, through intuition, through a feeling that something is different, even if nothing looks different. That's what happened. Here's what no one tells you. When momentum activates, it doesn't feel powerful at first. It feels unfamiliar. Unfamiliar thoughts, unfamiliar urges, unfamiliar impatience with things you used to tolerate. That unfamiliarity triggers self-doubt. People start questioning themselves right here. They assume something is wrong. They assume they're losing control. They assume they're being impulsive, so they retreat. They return to old habits, old thinking, old versions of safety. Not because those versions work, but because they're known. That's self-sabotage, not dramatic destruction, quiet retreat, mistaking unfamiliar for danger. The mind hates unfamiliarity more than it hates failure. Failure can be explained. Unfamiliarity cannot. So the mind creates stories. You're not ready. Wait a little longer. This isn't the right time. Be patient. But patience and avoidance feel very similar from the inside. That's why this phase is dangerous, not because it's risky, but because it's subtle. Nothing forces your hand. Nothing pressures you. Nothing demands a response. Momentum whispers, and only those who are listening catch it. This phase doesn't last. Momentum never waits. It either gets used or it dissipates. That's not punishment. That's physics. Energy either moves or it fades. And what comes next only responds to those who recognized this moment. Not those who overthought it. Not those who waited for consensus. Not those who needed reassurance. Those who noticed. Those who trusted the quiet shift. Those who didn't need proof to admit something had changed. You are not random. That line isn't comfort, it's precision. Random people don't feel this. Random people don't pause here. Random people don't sense timing before outcomes. Few people reached here because most people are trained to ignore moments like this. They're taught to prioritize logic over intuition, security over honesty, stability over alignment. So when alignment shifts, they suppress it. They label it distraction. They label it restlessness. They label it unnecessary. And then they wonder why life feels flat. You didn't suppress it. You noticed it. That already separates you. At midnight, the lock didn't break loudly. It cracked. And cracks change pressure. What once required force now responds to direction. That's the difference. You don't need to push harder now. You need to move differently. This is where people get confused. They think alignment means ease. They think momentum means confidence. They think clarity means certainty. It doesn't. Alignment feels like honesty without a script. Momentum feels like readiness without reassurance. Clarity feels like knowing without proof. That's uncomfortable for people who rely on control, but it's liberating for those who trust themselves. You've been operating under old constraints for a long time. Old roles, old expectations, old versions of who you thought you had to be. Those constraints didn't vanish. They weakened enough to give you room. Room to choose differently, room to speak differently, room to act without over-explaining. That's why things feel slightly off. Not wrong. Off like you've outgrown something but haven't stepped out yet. That's the gap. And the gap doesn't stay open forever. Most people rush to fill it with distractions, noise, busyness, opinions. You didn't. You stayed present. That's rare, because presence exposes truth. Truth about what you've been tolerating. Truth about what no longer fits. Truth about what you're ready to release. And truth is heavy. That's why few people reach this point consciously. But you did. You're here because something inside you refused to numb out. Something refused to accept repetition. Something refused to keep pretending. That something is not loud, not aggressive, not demanding. It's steady. And steady things move mountains quietly. What comes next is not revealed all at once. That's intentional, because if you knew everything, you'd hesitate. If you saw the full picture, you'd try to control it. So the next phase reveals itself only through movement. Small decisions, subtle shifts, different responses. Each one opens the next door. But only if you take it. This moment is not asking for faith. It's asking for recognition. Recognition that something unlocked. Recognition that timing changed. Recognition that staying the same now costs more than changing. That's the real shift. Not external opportunity, internal permission. Permission to stop shrinking. Permission to stop postponing. Permission to stop doubting what you already know. You are not random. You didn't imagine this. You didn't project meaning. You didn't misread the moment. Few people reached here, and those who did are standing at the edge of a different sequence. Same world, same responsibilities, same reality, different trajectory. Remember that, because the mind will try to convince you this was nothing. It will try to normalize the feeling. It will try to bury the awareness. It will try to pull you back into old loops. That's what it does. But you've already felt the shift, and once felt, it can't be unfelt. The lock cracked. The pressure changed, and what happens next will respond only to those who recognize this moment and refuse to pretend it didn't matter. Let's be honest. If you ignore this message, nothing dramatic happens. No loss, no collapse, no warnings, no alarms. Life doesn't punish you for hesitation. It doesn't confront you. It doesn't chase you down. It simply allows delay. And delay is dangerous because it feels harmless. Delay feels responsible. Delay feels mature. Delay feels like you're being careful. But delay is where momentum goes to disappear. Not all at once. Slowly, quietly. 6 months from now, you won't remember this moment clearly. You'll remember the feeling faintly, like a thought you almost followed, like a direction you almost trusted. You'll wake up one day and notice the motivation is gone, not drained, not stolen, just faded. You'll try to recreate it. You'll watch videos. You'll read books. You'll tell yourself you just need rest. But what you're really missing is the energy that only exists when timing is right. That energy doesn't respond to effort. It responds to alignment. A year from now, you'll look back and wonder why opportunities didn't line up, why things felt heavier, why progress felt forced, why everything required more pushing. You'll say things like, "I was close. I almost did. I just needed a little more time." Those words sound harmless. They sound reasonable, but they carry weight. Because almost is where potential lies when it's never realized. That's the cost. Not failure, not rejection, not embarrassment. Regret. Regret is quiet. Regret doesn't shout. Regret doesn't warn you. It visits you when things slow down, when life gets quiet, when distractions fade. It shows up in moments when you're alone with your thoughts. And it asks one question over and over again. Why didn't you move when it was lighter to move? This window doesn't stay open long. Not because time is cruel, but because clarity always moves on. Clarity is transient. It arrives. It invites. It waits briefly, then it leaves. And when it leaves, decisions become heavier. What felt intuitive starts to feel risky. What felt obvious starts to feel unrealistic. That's not imagination. That's timing expiring. Most people assume clarity stays until they're ready. It doesn't. Clarity belongs to the moment, not the person. And moments don't repeat the same way twice. If this resonates now, it's because timing chose you, not because you earned it, not because you planned it, because you were paying attention when alignment shifted. That's rare. Most people are distracted when timing arrives. They're busy. They're numb. They're caught in routine, so timing passes them quietly. They never know what they missed. They just feel like something is off. They call it bad luck. They call it burnout. They call it being stuck. But it's unclaimed timing. You don't get notified when timing leaves. You only notice its absence later, when everything requires more effort, when intuition feels dull, when decisions feel heavy again. That's why ignoring this moment feels safe now. Nothing immediate happens, but the cost compounds. Small hesitations stack. Small delays reinforce. Small excuses become habits. And habits shape identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who waits, someone who prepares endlessly, someone who thinks deeply, someone who almost moves. That identity feels subtle at first, but it solidifies. Then one day, you meet someone who moved when you didn't. Not more talented, not more confident, not more qualified, just earlier. And it stings, not because they succeeded, but because you recognize yourself in who you could have been. That's regret's sharpest edge. Ignore it, and life continues. But it continues in the same direction. Same loops, same doubts, same internal negotiations, until one day you realize you've been managing life instead of directing it. That realization is heavy, because by then, the window is gone. Not closed dramatically, not slammed shut, just no longer available. And here's the truth most people avoid. Not everyone gets chosen twice. Not everyone feels alignment again. Not everyone notices timing again. Not everyone gets another clear moment. Some do. Many don't. They settle into routines. They make peace with good enough. They silence the voice that once pushed them. And life remains acceptable, but never extraordinary. This message isn't threatening you. It's informing you that you're standing inside a moment that doesn't last. That what feels optional now becomes unavailable later. That moving later costs more than moving now. If this resonates, it's because something inside you already knows this. You don't need more convincing. You don't need more explanation. You just need to decide whether you respect timing when it shows up quietly. Because once it moves on, no amount of effort can recreate the ease you feel right now. And the question you'll face later won't be, what if? It will be, why didn't I? That's the consequence. And it doesn't announce itself until it's too late. This isn't a test of action yet. It's a test of awareness. No pressure, no demands, no deadlines, just recognition. If you feel called, then you already passed step one. That pull wasn't created by words. It existed before you arrived here. This only gave it shape. If you doubt yourself, that's normal. Doubt appears when awareness expands. It's the mind adjusting to a wider view. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It means something new entered the frame. If your heart feels quiet but alert, that's confirmation. Not excitement, not fear. Presence. A steady feeling that says, pay attention. That's not emotion. That's alignment. Here's the condition. If you trust this moment, your next decision feels lighter. Not easier, lighter. The weight you've been carrying starts to loosen. You don't overthink as much. You don't second-guess every step. You don't rehearse outcomes that never happen. Movement feels natural again. But if you dismiss this moment, everything stays heavier. Not immediately, not obviously, heavier in thought, heavier in hesitation, heavier in self-convincing. Decisions take longer. Intuition feels quieter. Motivation feels forced. That's the difference. Not success versus failure. Flow versus resistance. You don't need to prove anything. Not to the world. Not to anyone watching. You don't need to announce anything. Not your plans, not your intentions, not your direction. Real shifts don't need witnesses. They need honesty. You only need to stop pretending you didn't feel this. Stop minimizing it. Stop explaining it away. Stop telling yourself it was nothing, because it wasn't. You felt it. A pause inside you, a moment of clarity, a sense that something aligned. That feeling didn't come to entertain you. It came to inform you, and it saw you too. Not in a mystical way, in a precise way. Awareness recognizes awareness. That's why this moment feels personal. That's why it feels specific. That's why it feels like it's speaking directly to you, because it is. This test isn't about bravery. It's not about confidence. It's not about bold moves. It's about honesty with yourself when no one else is involved. Can you acknowledge what you felt without needing proof? Can you respect the moment without rushing it? Can you trust your awareness before the world confirms it? That's the test. And passing it doesn't look dramatic. It looks quiet, grounded, certain. You move differently after this. You choose differently. You respond instead of react. Nothing outside changes instantly, but everything inside rearranges. That's how real shifts begin. Not with action, with recognition. And you already recognized it. Which means the test was never about whether you could move. It was about whether you would listen. And you did. Final reminder, this message didn't chase you. It didn't force itself into your attention. It didn't demand belief. It waited. It waited until your mind slowed down, until your defenses dropped, until you were ready to notice. You are not random. Few people reached here, not because they weren't allowed, but because they weren't listening. The ones who reach this point are standing at a quiet edge, not the edge of chaos, not the edge of fear, the edge of choice. Nothing dramatic happens here. No spotlight, no applause, no announcement. Just awareness sharpening, just truth getting clearer. Just a subtle shift in how you see yourself and what you're willing to accept moving forward. This is where paths separate. One path keeps things familiar, comfortable, predictable. The other path doesn't look louder. It doesn't look safer. It just feels more honest. That honesty changes how the next chapter opens. Not immediately, not visibly, but permanently. You won't move the same way after this. You won't ignore the same signals. You won't tolerate the same misalignment. Even if you try, something inside you won't let you, because recognition changes identity. And once identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. So here's the question that only you can answer now that you recognize this moment. What will you do differently because of it? Not what sounds impressive, not what others would approve of. What you know is required. That answer doesn't need to be shared. It doesn't need to be written. It just needs to be honored. If this felt personal, you already know why. Because moments like this don't speak to everyone. They speak to the ones who are ready to listen.